Hi everyone, I'm Balwant Bopili, Specialist Solutions Architect with AWS, and my topic today is about the Amazon Event Bridge Pipes integration with Amazon TimeStream for Live Analytics. I will talk briefly about TimeStream for Live Analytics and Event Bridge Pipes and how this new integration will help you to ingest time series data efficiently. I will also perform a demo on how this integration can be set up and also be validated. A quick introduction about Amazon TimeStream for Analytics. It is a fast, scalable, and serverless time series database that makes it straightforward and cost effective to store, analyze trillions of events per day. You can use TimeStream for Analytics for use cases like monitoring hundreds of millions of IoT devices, industrial equipments, gaming sessions, streaming video sessions, financial log analytics, and many more. With TimeStream for Live Analytics, you can ingest tens of gigabytes of time series data per minute and run SQL queries on terabytes of time series data in seconds with high availability. Now coming to Event Bridge Pipes, even it is intended for point-to-point integration between supported sources and targets with support for advanced transformation, enrichment, and filtering. So you do not need another service for performing transformations or enrichment. Event-bridge pipes reduces the need of specialized knowledge and integration code when developing event-driven architectures, fostering consistency across your company's application. Most of time series use cases require data pipelines to support ingestion of real-time data using a data stream, and then processing and storing them into TimeStream for Live Analytics. Previously, you might require out-of-box adapters such as Apache Flink adapter or customized code to transfer time series data from supported AWS sources to TimeStream for Live Analytics. With this new integration, you have flexible low-code, no-code configuration-based solution to ingest data into TimeStream for Live Analytics. The supported sources for this integration are Kinesis data streams, Amazon DynamoDB, Amazon MQ, Amazon SQS, which is Simple Queue service. I will move on to show the demo. I'll show within few clicks how we can create TimeStream database and table. Then I'll show how to configure event-rich pipes to ingest data from Kinesis. For this demo, I will use Kinesis data generator to generate sample data. So the data will be going into Kinesis data streams. Then we'll use configured pipes to uh, seeing configured pipes to directly getting data ingested into Amazon TimeStream for Live Analytics. And the Amazon Kinesis data generator, which we are using to generate data, is a UI that simplifies how you send test data to Amazon Kinesis streams or even Amazon Kinesis Firehouse. Using the Amazon Kinesis data generator, you can create templates for your data, create random values to use for your data, and save the templates for future use. I'm in Amazon TimeStream console page. To start with, as I mentioned, I'll create a database and table. So I'm in the databases tab. I'll go ahead and click create databases. There are a couple of options in database configurations. One is standard database and other is sample database. If you choose sample database, you can get like a couple of sample data, that is IoT data or DevOps data. But for this demo, I'm going to choose a standard database and I'm going to give the database name as a vehicle metrics. And for encryption, I'm going to leave it as the default encryption. And if I want to add like a tags, we can definitely add tags here. Let's say test, and that's all. Within this few options, we are able to create. And once we click this create databases, we should be able to create the database. Okay, let me find my database. Okay, this is my database. I'll go ahead and start creating the table. I'll switch to tables tab and create. Click on create table. I can go ahead and give a name for the table, vehicle metrics. And Then move on to the schema settings. Timestream is not a rigid schema, so you don't have to predefine your columns. But as part of the schema settings, you can choose which is the partitioning key you would like to use for this particular table. There are a couple of options. One is custom partitioning and the other one is default partitioning. For the default partitioning, it basically goes through the default time stream column, which is measure underscore name. We recommend always to use customer defined partition key. So that the key which is highly cardinal and often used for querying. Okay, there are a couple basic concepts in time stream. One is dimension and other is measure. So to understand this, like let's take a simple example. If you're let's say there is a device that is capturing humidity and temperature, a device ID or device location which consistently remain the same will be the dimensions, and whatever the device is capturing like humidity, temperature, pressure, those become the measures. So the dimensions are the metadata of the data, and the measures are the ones which will help you to perform mathematical aggregations or quantitative analysis. So that's changing over the time. Those are the measures. So for this demo, I was planning to ingest vehicle metrics. So I'll go ahead and choose vehicle underscore ID as my partition key. This is an I cardinality column, and generally this is used for in all of the queries. So that's why I chose vehicle underscore ID as my partition key. Now moving on to the data retention, there are a couple of settings we have to set here. One is memory store retention, the other is magnetic store retention. I'll quickly talk what these are. So memory store in TimeStream for analytics, it's designed for point-in-time queries and high ingestion throughputs. And magnetic on the other side, it's not its memory is not more optimized than magnetic. They're just designed for different purposes. Magnetic is still works efficient for like analytical queries, and it's used for archival purposes. So I'll go ahead and keep this retentions by default, but you can absolutely change the memory retention starting from 1 hour to like 12 months, and for magnetic retention starting from 1 day to 200 years. Now, what happens when you set this retentions is based on the time of the data is automatically moved from memory store to magnetic store. And once the retention is reached on the magnetic store, the data is automatically purged out. Okay. You can enable magnetic store writes also. If you're loading data older than memory store retention, the data directly goes and sits in magnetic store also, which you can enable by clicking this button. So I'm keeping that as default, and rest of the options I'm not going to touch for this demo, but you can definitely enable backups as part of the table creation and also add tags. Okay, let me go ahead and create a table. Okay, now I have my table. Now on the tables tab in the timestream console page, here we can see the memory store retention, the magnetic store retention, how much ever we configured, and if you want to configure the backups, you can create configure the backups from here. We can see we have used custom defined partition key, and we can also check the what is our partition key, which is vehicle underscore ID in this use case. We can also start querying the table. So I clicked on actions and I can start querying the table. Yeah, I see 0 rows because we haven't ingested any data so far. Let's go ahead and set up the event rich pipes, and then we can pump in some data and come back to this console and validate. To switching to event bridge pipes, I have within the console timestream console, I have a navigation button here. If I click on this, it automatically takes me to the event bridge pipes page. So where I can start clicking on create pipe and start creating the event bridge pipe configurations. And to start with, I have to give a name for the pipe. So I'll just say vehicle metrics pipe here. Okay, and I have to choose source. So as I mentioned before, I'm gonna choose Kinesis as my source for this demo. I've already created a Kinesis team, which is vehicle metrics. I will choose batch size as 100, which is default anyhow. And for the on, I'm not going to choose batch window. Since those are optional and concurrent batches per shard. But yeah, those are definitely options if you would like to configure. On partial batch item failures, I'll click on automatic underscore bisect. What happens by clicking on this is it automatically offs each batch and retries each off until all the records are processed or only failed messages remain in the batch. So automatic setting up automatic underscore bisect is recommended. So the next step is setting up the filtering and enrichment. For this demo, we don't need filtering and enrichment options. So we set it up directly the target. You can choose to apply filtering and enrichment based on your requirements. If you add an enrichment layer, different services support different batching levels of batching. So that's you have a lot of flexibility there. Okay, now moving on to the target. The target is Amazon Times for Live Analytics table. So choose that accordingly. And the database is a underscore vehicle metrics. And within the database, we have vehicle under vehicle metrics created. Next is time field type. Here you have option to choose time stamp underscore format or epoch based on your requirement. But for this demo, I'm going to choose timestamp underscore format, which will become the default time value. And I'm going to set the format as like this. And in the data properties of Kinesis event are the field inside the data object, like your original message to Kinesis. So in this case, it would be time, vehicle ID, miles. This value, I'm going to set it as dollar dot data dot connection time. So connection time key is what we send it to Kinesis, and the way we access here in the event bridge pipes is dollar dot data dot connection time. And moving on to version value. For version value, you can use latest value to upsert data points. In TimeStream for Live Analytics, you can only update or add measures. Dimensions cannot be updated. Each Kinesis record includes a value, which is approximate arrival timestamp, which is what we plan to set it here. So whenever a stream successfully receives and stores a record, that means it's the latest record, and we use that to handle the updates. So let me put that here accordingly. Dollar dot data dot approximate arrival timestamp. Next, we set up the data model. This is where we specify which keys within the Kinesis message we would like to access and how we would like to store them in TimeStream for Live Analytics. So here we have two options. One is Visual Builder and another is JSON Editor. Flexible to give which keys you would like to access from the Kinesis and how you would like to store in TimeStream for Live Analytics. But for this demo, I'm going to choose as JSON Editor. I already have the JSON created for my use case. I'll quickly walk through what this JSON contains. So there is a dimensions mapping and there is multi-measure mapping. The dimension mapping is where you specify the list of dimensions, and multi-measure mapping is where you specify the list of measures. In the dimensions mapping, you specify like which key you are accessing within the Kinesis data object and how you would like to store them in the timestamp analytics, and also the the, the data type. Similarly, for measures, we have three measures: miles, engine status, battery level, and the respective data value type. I'm going to attach the timestream documentation link where you can build the JSON based on your requirement. Now that we have the data model, before creating the pipe, we have to do the pipe settings. I would like to keep my pipe active as soon as it's created. Like if you would like to disable like as soon as created and make some changes later on and then come back and activate it, you can. That's definitely an option. And moving on to the permissions, you can give an existing role, or you can let even rich pipe create a new role with the minimum permissions required for it to read the data from Kinesis and like write the data to timestream for analytics. And I'm gonna leave the encryption as default. Now coming to the retry policies, I'm gonna set it as 30 minutes. So the records older than 30 minutes are automatically sent to DLQ, and this totally depends on use case to use case. For retry items, I'm gonna set it as 10 minutes, sorry, 10 times. So any transient issues that will be retried for 10 times. After the retried attempts, the for any persistent issues, the data is automatically moved to DLQ. Now coming to DLQ, you can I'm gonna toggle the scheduler queue, and I'm gonna select SKS queue, which I've already created. Coming to logs, I'm gonna stick with the default log option, which is CloudWatch logs, and you can choose different levels of log level: error, info, and trace. Info gives like all the information. So for this demo, I'm going to choose info. And if I would like to include the execution data to see like if I have any issues. So I can capture the SDK requests and responses on everything. So if I would have more details to troubleshoot the issue. Coming to CloudWatch logs, it automatically creates a new log group unless you would like to specify an existing log groups. And if you'd like to specify tags, you can specify tags, and that's it. You can just go ahead and create pipe, and that will create and enable the pipes. Now we have the event-rich pipes created and up and running. We can go ahead and ingest the data using Kinesis Data Generator and validate the data using TimeStream for Analytics Query Editor. I've already installed Kinesis Data Generator in my account of CloudFormation template, and I've logged in through the UI, which is what you see here. And I've already pre-selected the region and the stream, which is what we configured in the event-rich pipes. And accordingly, the data model, like how we have configured in the event-rich pipe, connection type, and the dimensions and the measures. We could test the template, and we can set up multiple templates. I'll start sending the data. Okay, now the data is being streamed. Let's go ahead and validate here. I'm in the time stream for Analytics Query Editor, and okay, now we see the data is being ingested, and that can help us validate that the data is being ingested from event-rich pipes. With that, we can conclude our demo. And if you have any further questions, reach out to the email displayed here. Really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much.